Namaste and good evening all. It might be morning in US and other western part of the world. I'd like to warm welcome you all in this webinar series. This webinar series is being conducted by the Services of Research and Development R&D Australia. R&D is research institution which aims to contribute on the sustainable development through research and evidence-based policy advocacy. Today, we are going to discuss on internationalization of Dalit issues, opportunities, and challenges. As we all know that Dalit atrocities, mainly caste-based discrimination, are increasing in Nepal. Nepal has concluded political transition by promulgating new federal republican constitution. New Constitution 2015 has guaranteed Dalit fundamental rights. The Constitution, including its subsidiary laws, have eradicated the caste-based discrimination and untouchability. However, the increasing atrocities, human rights violations are mockery to the constitutional provisions, anti-discrimination laws, including provisions of national and international human rights treaties and principles. 6 Dalit youths lynching in western part of Nepal of Rukum district on 24 May 2020 is indeed black face of Nepal, which has evident the caste intolerance. This incident has also shown the clear picture of failed government that is not able to protect the basic human rights of Dalit in Nepal. Only within last 3 months of COVID-19 lockdown in Nepal, more than 34 cases of caste-based discriminations and atrocities occurred throughout the country. These are only cases of Dalit atrocities reported in news media. There might be several other cases of caste discrimination which are neither reported nor taken seriously. The cases of Dalit human rights violation are often mediated within community which are neither reported nor taken seriously. The cases of Dalit human rights violation are often mediated within community which are neither reported nor counted in the dataset of human rights violation in Nepal. A recent online survey carried out by Services of Research and Development Australia has also proved the cases of increasing caste-based discrimination in Nepal, where 18% of Dalit respondents among 300 who taken part in the survey are victim of such discrimination. And there were various forms of discrimination during lockdown. Among the reported cases, trashing, killings, verbal abuse, rape are key forms of discrimination which Dalit faced during this lockdown. Neither the constitutional provision nor anti-discrimination laws have been effective in reducing the level of discrimination. What are the key underlying factors for such violation is clear for state rulers, but there is a lack of serious actions. The growing impunity, silence, and reluctance of rulers and so-called non-Dalit is threat to Dalit human rights defenders. In this context, the Dalit leaders, civil society, and community are now resisting such repulsive discrimination and atrocities. But unfortunately, the Nepalese government is not effective enough to prevent and protect the rights of Dalits in Nepal. This is a real challenge for all Dalit human rights defenders globally. Therefore, there is increasing need of internationalization of Dalit issues. Just to cite an example, informal alliance of 20 Dalit rights-based organizations and activists from Australia, US, UK, Europe, and Nepal submitted urgent appeal in Rukum district Dalit genocide to the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, OCHR, International Criminal Court, including other international agencies. As a result, OCHR appealed Nepal government for independent investigation, and International Criminal Court has communicated to the Secretariat of Global Dalit Alliance. This also proves the needs of Global Dalit Alliance to create pressure to Nepal government and other international agencies. But question raises who and how to internationalize Dalit issues. If this has been already internationalized, then what are gaps and challenges? To answer these questions, today we have Professor Folmer, who is Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Anthropology at Wake Forest University. He received his PhD in anthropology from Case Western Reserve University in 1985 after having conducted geographic research in Kaski district from 1979 to 1980. He has served as a founding board member of the International Commission on Dalit Rights since 2009 and is currently vice chair. He has been a member of the executive committee of the Association for Nepal and Himalayan Studies since 2012. He also is a member of Dignity Initiative and works closely with Dignity Initiative on several projects. Since 2001, he has committed his research to issues affecting Dalits. He has also written several articles and done extensive research on Dalit identity, rights, and mental health. He also conducts workshops in Nepal for Dalit scholars. Before Steve's presentation, I would like to highlight basic rules for this webinar. First is, this webinar will be for maximum 1.5 hours. First half an hour will be for presentation. There will be opportunity for question and answer. Participants can raise hand or send question in chat box. Participants are requested to put your mic on mute during discussion. Now, I would like to request Professor Steve Folmer for his presentation.
Issues of internationalization of Dalit rights, and to discuss a little bit about the opportunities and challenges. I do want to say that this specific issue has not been my main focus of research, although it is always a touchstone for me when I think about Dalit issues in Nepal. But when Momji asked me to make this presentation, I very quickly went and started a more thorough review of the literature, which also includes Mom's recent book. If you haven't read it, you should certainly do so. It's an excellent piece. I'm not all the way through it yet, but I'm still reading it. And I found that that this issue is not widely covered yet for Dalit people. So I'm going to start the presentation by saying that more than a cohesive thesis with a set of arguments and specific data that back things up, these are more a set of ideas that I have collected over the past several days about what how we might focus our efforts in regard to internationalization of Dalit issues. And so the presentation itself is a little bit loosely organized as I have, as my ideas have sort of bounced around a little bit like a tennis ball on a tennis court. So I apologize for it not being extremely orderly, but I hope that it is somehow provocative of some idea exchange for us once I'm through. So what I would like to do is to use screen share, but I think that Mom has to make me a co-host in order for me to do that, because I'm getting a message that I can't share yet.
Okay.
Go to participants, and then there is more on Steve's name.
More, yeah.
And while we're preparing, also, I also want to make another small apology that my Nepali is not as good as everybody's English. And so I am going to speak in English, and I hope that my English is good enough for you all to follow me.
I made you co-host, Steve.
This was, yes, I want to continue. Okay. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to to guide my comments. And so that's what you see up on the screen here. And this, of course, is just the title page. Now let's see if I can figure out how to make advance the slides. There we go. Now let me back up. Okay, so my first question when I was thinking about this presentation was, what do we mean by the Dalit issue or Dalit issues? And I think the central focus is on the unequal treatment of people who are Dalit, and the treatment makes for a lesser treatment in terms of the overall humanity of people. So Dalit people are treated as lesser. I think that we can all agree that the main vehicle by which Dalit people are treated as lesser is the practice of untouchability, which has been imposed for millennia upon Dalit people in South Asia, and results in a structure that derives from the ancient rule based on the Varna system that mandates a certain set of statuses for people and implies also a certain set of behaviors towards one another. But I also think that individuals can't be left out of this picture. And this speaks to a basic debate that people have in social sciences about whether or not it is structures that marginalize and direct violence towards particular groups of people, or if it's individuals. So there's a sort of a structure versus agency debate. But I believe strongly that both of these are implicated. And in fact, if you think about structures, structures only exist through the individual actions of people who use their agency to support that structure. So if everybody in Nepal decided that we will not prevent Dalit people from entering temples, then the structure itself would change. So structure and individual agency are in a dance together, and they mutually reinforce one another. So this results in the kinds of things that government officials and NGOs, et cetera, focus on, and those are disparities. And the disparities are in things like health, education, political representation, access to all kinds of resources, wealth, housing, respect, dignity, et cetera. And the purpose, I think, of looking at Dalit issues and the question of internationalization is to turn to a definition that I got from Purvi Mehta. I don't know if you all know her work. She's a scholar at Colorado College in the United States, and she's also part of the ICDR board. And she wrote a beautiful dissertation in which she describes internationalization as the attempt to translate caste-based discrimination into an internationally recognized wrong. And the main way that Dalits from India have attempted to internationalize Dalit issues is by associating caste-based discrimination with social justice issues, which are widely recognized as being wrongs across the world. I also asked the question of what are the broad strokes of international influence on Dalit rights? And I was thinking about two things here: Dalits in general, but also Dalits of Nepal, which are two very, very similar issues, but there are some differences. So again, the what is the recognition of equal and equitable treatment, and the where does this happen is in Nepal, but broadly across South Asia. And another question that we should ask in this regard is not only the recognition of Dalit rights, but the recognition that the treatment of people as Dalits has become internationalized through diaspora. So this is an issue that we don't hear a lot about, although Mitra Pariyar has written beautifully on this topic, that in diaspora, Dalits continue to receive the expected but unwanted treatment by people who think of themselves as higher caste. For whom do we want to internationalize Dalit rights? And of course, it's Dalit people, but we should also think about other considerations, since the internationalization of Dalit rights is also attempting to tie these rights to other rights. We should also think of the other people who need to be represented by similar efforts. So gender and other considerations, such as religion, should also perhaps be considered. And then one of the questions that really compelled me, somebody's mic is not muted. It might help us if it was. So by whom? So is it by people of South Asian origin that we want to internationalize this for? So, you know, one of the phenomena that I notice is that when I teach students in the United States about South Asia, the caste system is very opaque to them. They don't really understand it. They don't know what a Dalit person is, and they only know it through an academic abstract presentation that I make to them. But if they were to greet any of you, and I think almost everybody in the audience is Dalit, I don't think they would recognize any of you as Dalit, because they simply don't know. So one of the questions is, who is it that we want to affect by internationalizing Dalit rights? That is, affect on the cause side rather than the receiver side. And then furthermore, do we also want to heighten awareness of the sometimes there are practices within the Dalit community of one Dalit group either marginalizing or being accused of marginalizing another. So how have, you know, what are again, the broad strokes of how Dalit people have attempted to address the issue, not necessarily internationally. In terms of addressing it within the confines of their own nations, there have been attempts like religious conversions, and of course there's a major religious conversion going on in Nepal right now to the Sachai movement, which is the most recent of the major developments in that direction. There have also been attempts to make headway politically, economically, or programmatically through NGO involvement. These internal development approaches have been the main source of impetus to change from within. But they've also, mainly after the British left India for South Asia in general, but mainly after 1950 for Nepal, there have been appeals to influential internationals. So in the history of the internationalizing effort, a lot of this again is according to Purvi Mehta. Ambedkar started out by trying to highlight the difference of Dalit people to others in order to make headway towards equality. This has shifted in modern India, and I think you can see this also among Nepali efforts, to the politics of similarity. That is, to tie caste domination to other social injustices, and to recognize that caste is, one part of that effort is to assert that caste is not really unique to South Asia, but is universal and just goes under other names. So Dalit people can be found in other parts of the world. They're called Barakumin in Japan, etc. So these two ways of addressing it have been talked about as the politics of difference or the politics of similarity. And again, my view is similar to my view of the difference between structure and agency. That is, it's really a combination of things. And it's the politics of comparability that I think is where many efforts actually lie. And that is to balance a similarity with a difference. And that is to show how there's a structural similarity of Dalit issues with other issues of marginalized or issues of other marginalized people. That is, the structures are similar, but there is a difference not only, or in two ways. One difference is the difference that exists in how Dalit people are perceived, but also a difference in different Dalit-like groups. So even though African Americans suffer very similarly in terms of structure in the United States, they're still not quite the same thing as Dalits. And by not being quite the same thing as Dalits, it's easy, for example, for Americans to focus on African American issues because of their familiarity with them, and not really to focus on Dalit issues because they are distant and Dalit people are a bit of a question mark in most Americans' minds. So I also wanted to think about different levels of internationalization. So I was thinking of this in terms of neighboring countries versus distant countries. So the neighboring countries are the ones that I would think of as SAARC countries or South Asian countries, where caste is strong and it's indigenous. But it's not only South Asia, it also is paralleled by places like China. So, for example, Nepal is heavily influenced basically by the actions of two of their very powerful neighbors, India and China. And India's caste system is well known in South Asia and really well known across the world, at least the academic world. But China's Hukuo system is not as well understood, but it has many parallels. I have not myself studied it in any detail, and am just now learning a little bit about it. And so I think that is one indication that China's Hukuo system is kind of under the radar. And because it's under the radar, there's some mutual finger pointing of India and China, each of them accusing the other of having caste systems. But the Indian stance is that it's not unique to India, except that it's become sort of a cottage industry among universities that have departments of or centers for studies of South Asian people and have sections of those that focus on Brahmanism. Whereas you don't find that same academic engagement with the issues of the Hukuo system in China. But in distant nations, South Asians are recent immigrants, although some of them, of course, are a couple of centuries long. And South Asians are minority populations, except in local circumstances. And so there's a lack of a deep appreciation for what caste is. Again, when students of mine, and my students study South Asia, and they study what Dalit people are, but when they encounter a South Asian, they simply see what they think of as an Indian. They don't even really see a Nepali person unless they are taught that this person is Nepali. And they don't really see the person who is South Asian as bearing the system of caste in any way, and certainly are not aware of what level of caste they might be, nor what kind of treatment they might receive because of the caste that they belong to. And so in non-South Asian countries, there is very little caste-based legislation that exists. I think there's not only now just a little bit developing in the UK, but we don't really see any of this happening in the United States unless there are very, very recent movements that are making some ground in Washington, D.C., for example. So in thinking about the internationalization of Dalit rights historically, we should also remember that Nepal was maybe the first recipient, or at least one of the first recipients of the caste system. That is, the caste system was exported to Nepal in the early, somewhere probably around 200 to 600 AD. And therefore, Nepal has been thoroughly internationalized itself. This, however, was during a time when Dalits had no rights. So there was no internationalization of Dalit rights. People that we now think of as Dalit were not called Dalit back then. And I don't see any evidence that anybody thought about the rights of people who are now called Dalit. So caste spread throughout South Asia. And since the end of the colonial period, it has been fully international within South Asia. That is, all South Asian countries have forms of caste, and even groups that claim they don't have caste have systems that are either caste or very caste-like. South Asian immigration, mainly after colonialism, exported not only people, but their social systems to other mainly non-English speaking parts of the world. I'm going to accelerate this a little bit. I realize that I'm already almost 20 minutes into this and I'm not very far. So I wanted to move along a little faster here and talk about the process of internationalizing. And I've taken a look at the writings of Mehta and some others, and this is the process that I see, and I'll talk about where I think the gap is. So we've been involved in the translation of Dalit issues into social justice issues that parallel other marginalized communities around the world. So the idea here is that we're trying to explain what Dalit issues are. And that's where most of the focus has been in how do we package Dalit rights for an international community so that they appreciate what it is that Dalit people have to endure on a day-to-day basis. What we don't know very well, though, is how much of this model of Dalit issues is being accepted by the international community. I don't know, for example, whether or not there's a meaningful level of understanding that has come in consequence to the educational efforts that we've made. And I think it's very important that we try to understand what is it that other people understand about Dalit issues. I'll give you one example. When I was working with ICDR on trying to develop a caste freedom index, we were shopping the idea around to various embassies in Kathmandu. And in every single presentation we did, also followed up by presentations that we did with the State Department in Washington, D.C., a major part of the presentation was to answer the question of who are Dalit people? Is caste basically the same thing as class, as economic class? What sort of injustices do Dalit people suffer, etc.? So we were still back at the translation stage, but if we want to think of the outcome, we never got the Caste Freedom Index funded by the Swiss, by the Netherlands, by the United States, by the UK. Nobody has ever stepped forward to do that. Now, it's possible that the Caste Freedom Index itself is not very compelling, but it is clear that we still have a lot of work to do to educate, and we don't know what will happen in terms of acceptance that these issues actually do exist. And then, of course, the next step is once they are accepted, will there be a translation of these new understandings into political action? And then will that political action have any effect at the local level? I'm going to skip this part. I'm not going to skip it. I'm going to say that one of the things that that impedes the understanding of the challenges of Dalit people from Nepal is how history has characterized Nepal. So Nepal has historically been looked at as a bastion of Hinduism, and it has packaged itself that way. It's associated with a caste system that's widespread across South Asia, but not really differentiated from South Asia in any way, except to think of it as more Hindu than other parts of South Asia, more purely Hindu. And then again, there is the association of Dalits with poverty. And a Western view is that economic status takes priority over everything. But what Westerners theoretically don't seem to grasp very often is that poverty is an outcome of social marginalization. But in the West, it's thought to be the cause of marginalization. So I think they've got the cause and effect backward when it comes to understanding what we mean by marginalization. And you can see that through comments of the President of the United States, who has just issued a statement that he is going to take care of all the African American concerns in America by getting everybody's jobs back. And that, of course, is not the problem. The problem isn't that having a job makes you African American. It's that being African American prevents you from getting a job, just like being Dalit prevents you from access to things like wealth, status, education, etc. So we need to instill some knowledge and concern. And I think one of the places where we need to do some work is to really push on the point that that caste is not the same thing as race, and caste is not the same thing as class. Caste has a lot of structural similarity with race in the United States, but race is not the same thing of the same importance in many other countries. And then we need to work on trying to articulate a set of reasons why other people should care. And maybe this question pops up in my mind because it's so hard to make Americans care about things that they don't seem to understand. And so it's important that we understand that this is a challenge, that maybe we haven't learned yet how to make people in other countries care. So internally, one of the challenges for Dalit people is that they have suffered legal disparities. And we've heard a lot about differential punishment for crimes committed by Dalits, who almost always get more severe punishment, longer sentences. But it's not as visible to many people from the outside that there are different levels of punishment for crimes committed against Dalit people. So crimes committed against Dalits tend not to have the same severity of punishment as crimes committed against higher caste people. I think this is maybe a minor point, but still one that might be worth trying to educate the international community about. I'm also not sure that the international community fully appreciates what the struggle for secularism is in a place like Nepal. I think that the international community finds it a real curiosity that there's a lot of support by Dalits for Nepal being a Hindu state, even though there's a lot of rhetoric that wants to separate Nepal from Hinduism. And in fact, many Dalits want to separate themselves from Hinduism, but surveys have shown that that Dalits by and large still support Nepal being a Hindu state. And then I think another challenge is the idea of internationalism itself. And I run into this occasionally when I enter the field of either research on the Dalits of Nepal, or when I enter into a more advocacy or activist stance. So recent exchanges that I've had on Facebook, in which I was supporting the effort to call the government of Nepal to task for not following up on the Rukum disaster. One post was from a person who basically said outsiders should not be involved in our problems. And I've heard this many times. So the whole idea that internationalism is something that is desirable by Dalit leaders is not a view that's shared by everyone in Nepal. And this may be a place for us to also direct some attention. I wanted to bring up my own view about the process by which people of different castes go through disasters. And some of you know that I've studied the effect of the 2015 earthquake on people of Nepal, mainly focusing on Dalit outcomes. But over time, I mean, it's been 5 years now since the earthquake occurred. And over time, I've started to think of disasters not in isolation, but disasters as overlapping with each other, one disaster following another, and disasters being embedded in other disasters. And so I think if we think of disasters along a timeline in which there are times of more normal times when we're not dealing with the effects of disaster, followed by disruptions of these times of normalcy by disaster. My sense is that times of disaster are used by people in power to further inscribe the unequal treatment of Dalit people. And I think we see that going on right now with the COVID problem and Mom's introduction telling us that now there have been 34 newspaper reported cases of atrocities committed against Dalit people. I don't keep track of the number of atrocities, but my sense is that this is a big acceleration. And of course, when the government turns a blind eye, it just allows people to, in informal circumstances, continue to mistreat Dalits in very horrifying ways. So disasters are opportunities, and sometimes people think of opportunities as good things, but in this case, it's an opportunity for bad things for Dalit people, and that is to reverse gains that are made in non-disastrous times or during other disasters. So disasters are really upheavals in which a lot of things can happen. I believe that the Maoist insurrection can be called a disaster, but I also believe that it was the root of many gains that have been made by Dalit people. But then a lot of these got overturned when the earthquake came along, and then now with COVID. I also want us to consider the idea of disasters being able to last for thousands of years. And so I consider the caste system itself a disaster, at least in terms of the perspective of Dalit people. We have a mic that's on, maybe we could mute it. Okay, so what about opportunities? So one opportunity, of course, is that there is the presence of foreign governments and NGOs in Nepal, and there's a major presence. And so there are internationals who are close by that have a lot of economic resources, and they have the ability to influence the Nepalese government, the operation of the economy, etc., the daily lives of Nepalese people, but we also have the opportunity to influence them. And so it's really important for us to repeat the messages. The, Ambedkar's call for us to educate people, we must understand, is a very long, very difficult process. And as a teacher, I understand this a lot, that we have to repeat messages for people truly to get what it is we want. So we need to be in more contact with these agencies, and instead of listening to what they want to tell us, we need to tell them what do Dalit people want and how do we achieve those goals. There's also an increased presence of Dalit organizations in foreign countries. And tied to that, there's also an increased recognition of Dalit issues, at least at the level of organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, etc. So in the United States, we now have several Dalit organizations. We have the presence of a new Ambedkar Institute at Brandeis University. And so we need to be in more conversation with them and to help them promote their efforts for getting the word out, so to speak. And then the other question that I brought up was, how do we make internationals care? And one of the focuses has been on using Dalit issues as a way to foster a kind of politics of shame. I think that is an unfortunate title, but I think it is true. We have to try to shame the government of Nepal, shame the government of India into a process by which they really truly start to examine what their role has been in allowing the ongoing mistreatment of Dalit people through many decades. But I think these politics of shame can also be turned outwardly to internationals and try to open their eyes to the treatment of Dalit people within diasporic communities. So we know that often Dalits walk away from situations in which they are surrounded by other South Asians and feel that the system of mistreating Dalits has been exported along with themselves. So I wanted to say that there are certain things that I think we should congratulate ourselves for, and that is that right now we see Dalit people banding together for a common cause within the COVID-19 movement. And also I noticed that there is a lot of support for similar issues, for example, in the African American community. So ICDR and a couple of other Dalit organizations have spoken out against the murder of George Floyd. And I'm hoping that somehow we can get maybe some African American organizations to possibly recognize that similar things are going on in other parts of the world. I think that it's been a difficult process, but we've made some progress on the idea of balancing similarity and difference. And it's really important that we maintain the distinctness of Dalit people, distinct from other people in the caste system and distinct from other groups that are oppressed, but who share the similar structural process of being oppressed by more powerful groups. And then, of course, we're going to need to try to consolidate even further and perhaps try to expand our efforts to specific political actions that will take some money, some rupees or dollars, and will take some added service. One thing that African Americans of late have been discussing and criticizing is not only are African Americans expected to endure all the inequities that the white community imposes on them, but they also have to shoulder the labor of explaining to the white community what the issues are. I think that's a very unfortunate position to be in, but I'm not sure there's a way out of that. And so I think that in a way, I'll be suggesting that Dalit people have to ask one another, can we shoulder more of this burden? Can we try more to explain to the international community what it is that the Dalit issue is, and how can the international community assist with that? And I think with that, I have an end to my slideshow, and I will unshare my screen. I hope that made a little bit of sense.
Thank you, Professor Steve. It was a very comprehensive presentation indeed. I like the idea of politics of shame, and of course there are a few questions from participants that what would be strategies around politics of shame, and there are a few other very important ideas you have explored here, and then of course there might be different questions from participants. Yeah, so now I'd like to ask Dr. Dona Rosali to give few remarks on it in this specific presentation. Then I'll move to the questions from participants. Dr. Dona Rosali. You are on mute.
Momsar, please could you unmute Dr. Drona?
I'm trying, but it's not happening.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Momji, for this opportunity to make a remark on Professor Folmer's presentation. The presentation has been very wonderful. It covered a lot of areas that we are concerned about. Basically, he underscored the root of the cause and the issues that we are hovering around. Basically, he also brought some of the new concepts. And they're very educational and also very important for our ongoing movement as well. Especially the new concept he brought were kind of the export of the caste system in Nepal. Basically, majority of the people in Nepal were not Hindus originally, and they were actually after the Hindus migration from India to Nepal. That's when it was. That's why internationalization and export has been actually the case in Nepal. This is not very much recognized in Nepal. Many Nepalese people think that Nepal is almost like the origin of Hinduism, but that's not the case. Majority of the hill peoples didn't know about Hinduism. They were not Hindus, they are made Hindus. Even though Hinduism is said to be non-convergent one, one cannot be converted into Hinduism. But in case of Nepal, large number of people, large number of population have been actually converted into Hinduism. All the hill tribes were not Hindus originally. Now they have been taken into the Hindu fold as a result of the state measures. Basically, state has driven that that course of action in the history. So that is a very new concept he brought in. he highlighted the first thing, that is that people are around the world in international scenario. Many societies don't know what Dalit is, what is this caste discrimination. It's very true. Even I can remember one case where one of our friends who has been to Nepal as a Peace Corps volunteer. In the whole time of her time as a Peace Corps volunteer, she didn't know there exists a caste system, there exists a Dalit group. Because in the villages, when some foreigners, especially Western people, come to Nepal, many people who are leaders in the villages, they actually hide the Dalit people, and they don't show to them. Later on, she came back to America, and she realized she has missed something. And later on, she did a PhD on Dalit issues. I'm talking about Dr. Laurie Vasily. She had told me that story. So in that way, it is hidden, even in Nepal, when foreigners go there. Only very few people who are actually friends of Dalits, like a very good friend of Dalit, Professor Folmer himself, Steve himself is. Only those people who are really keen on knowing about Dalits, they would know about Dalits, because Dalit people traditionally in Nepal, they are scattered all over. They are part of the society, but they are very minority somewhere in the back of the outback in the villages. For that reason, they are hidden, but they are quite substantial in number. More than 15% of the population is Dalits. That's why they need to be reckoned with, but they have not been not recognized. That is one of the reason also not having been internationalized. And also it is because of the color, as you can imagine. Dalit people show up in every hues and colors. Some are fair, some are brown, some are darker than others. Same as Brahmin or Kshetri or Newar, they also come in the same colors. There is no color differences, because in Brahmin also you can see a very fairer person, brown person or darker person, same case as Dalits. So in terms of lineage, basically, basically Dalit people are actually mixed class. I did some little bit of internalization of myself. Actually, Dalits are a mixed culture. In Canada, there is what is known as Métis people, who are actually the mixed people with Europeans and indigenous people, First Nations people. Just like that, Dalits seem to be a mixed class in terms of their bloodlines. That's why they are not recognizable as such. That's also one of the things we should consider. And Professor Folmer pointed out about the challenges and opportunities which are so important to carry on for us. And he did try to mention about different attempts we have made on religion conversion, political, economic, and programmatic. All have been there. In terms of religion, basically, Professor Folmer has written one article. He has quoted my version of thinking views also, that religious conversion would have been more rigorous. It was a fertile land for one Christian missionary to have the conversion in Nepal, but they missed the chance. They had the missed opportunities. When the missionaries came to Nepal to with the intention of converting Nepalese people into Christianity, they actually landed on the wrong class of people. They actually approached Brahmins who would never convert themselves into Christianity, most of them. But if they had actually reached out to Dalit people back then, then by this time, probably many of the Dalits would have been Christian that time. So they missed that opportunity. To tell you the story about the Christian missionaries, actually there were good boarding schools run by missionaries. There were hardly any Dalit people given any entrance to that schools. All were Brahmins or so-called high caste people. That's how they had missed the opportunities. Now there is a trend. We are free in terms of expecting the conversion, because religion is something which should be flowing freely. It should be the people's choice, not the thing that comes as a birth. Yeah, nowadays it should be a personal choice to have one religion or other, one faith or other. So, and for that reason, Dr. Ambedkar also had put himself in a place where he recommended, and he himself went to become a Buddhist. That was for a good reason, which is a more scientific religion, and it is more acceptable in Hindu societies, traditional. That's one thing. One point I want to make, I don't want to take too much of time, but one thing I would like to mention here is about the state's role in Nepal's case. What is happening is Nepal is basically not in economically, or for many grounds, it's not an independent country. It depends on what is happening out there, especially Nepal sees Nepali state authorities and even people think America is a wonderland. It's a dreamland, and it's a role model. Even state also thinks that way. For that reason, what happens is they always try to look at what's happening in America, and any slackness in movement like human rights, or any discrimination, if that is happening in America, it is bound to be reflecting on Nepal. People will take an advantage. There will be slackness in Nepal as well. After the Maoist movement, Nepal had already Nepal was taking already a very good right path to move forward. But we can see at the state now, some of the leaders, especially in power, they are slackening that tone of moving forward as a progressive society. As a result, whatever happening in Rukum, Western Rukum, is a reflection of that. It is because you can imagine that particular village, Western Rukum, is a place where there has been the most change, radical change in caste discrimination and untouchability. They had declared that they were the first to declare the untouchability-free society, and there are much more intermarriages happening there than anywhere else in Nepal. It's already a converted village. But what happened was current government and authorities and people in power, they are showing the inclination of going back to fundamentalist Hinduism, and they are following the Modi government as well. President Trump is also going to that fundamentalist regressive type of movement. These are all influencing the people, being encouraged to go backwards. That's what is happening. So this internationalization issue is very important. What happens in the Western countries, what happens in the other countries are going to determine Nepal's fate. Actually, Nepal already was in a very good road to emancipation and freedom of Dalit people, but it is getting a slackness right now. That's what is happening. I don't want to take much time. Actually, Professor Folmer has been a very good friend and supporter of Nepal Dalit Info. We did a lot of work together, even though from distance. Lately, for past few years, because of my professional engagement, I have not been so proactive in Nepal Dalit Info. It's still active. I mean, Dalit Info still lives, but it's not very active. As a result, we have not been connected so much for last few years. I apologize for that, and you have been a great supporter of us. Thank you so much. We are grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosali, for your important remarks in this the webinar. Now it's time for participant questions. First, I'd like to ask if there are any female participants who want to raise question. Yeah, I can see there is one. Okay, so now I ask Sita Rosali for your question.
Hello, namaste. I want to ask one question, Professor Stephen. Before we know caste-based discrimination took place within South Asia, Nepal and India. But nowadays, because of migration, the caste-based discrimination also has been throughout the world. And based on my belief and my experience, since I'm in Australia, this is a big challenge for the all over the globe. And what do you think about this problem? How other country can prevent this caste-based discrimination? Is there any legal challenges for those countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Sita Rosali. So I wanna get more question on it. So there is one question from Tesunar. Would you like to ask yourself or Tesunar?
Sorry. I have already put my question in chat box. Two questions are there. The first question is about the caste index. Professor Folmer, he was involved to develop caste index. So I want to know the status of that report and how can we use that as a advocacy tool. That is one question. And another question is about I had written. Yeah, politics of shame. What could be the good effective strategies for using that issues as Dalit issues as politics of shame? These two questions I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Sure. So now can I ask Manshipali to raise your question?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and then thank you, Professor Steve Folmer. It was really nice to go through all your presentations. And then I have a question, like you slightly talk about role of diaspora in internationalization of this Dalit issue. So what could be their role to play so that these human rights issues can be like international affair of every country?
Okay, thank you, Manshipali. Now I'd like to ask Stephen, Professor Stephen, to quickly answer those questions, and then I'll get more questions later on. Thank you, Professor.
Well, thank you so much for the questions. And yeah, I would like to talk about the overlap between the question by Sita and the question by Man, which is about you know, how do we make Dalit issues a larger concern in places where there's a South Asian diaspora. And again, you know, I am not an expert on this issue, but I do have an opinion based on how similar political issues have been put forward in places like the United States, but also in places like Great Britain, et cetera. So, I want to take us back to a very important article that Drona wrote several years ago, in which he pointed out that we're going to make very small steps towards improved conditions. And we have to accept that. The African American community has had to accept that for 500 years in the United States. And I think the Dalit community has to know that, that progress will be slow. But in places like diasporas, I think that progress can go one of two ways. One is that nothing can happen, or it could be accelerated. And the reason that nothing can happen is that so many people don't appreciate the caste system or the position of Dalit people within the caste system. And so you have to go through the whole Ambedkar process of educate, organize, and agitate. But the opportunity to move a little faster is also there because there's not 2 millennia of history that supports the caste system in a place like Australia or the United States. So you can open, if you can open people's eyes to the issues, then you might be able to get them to appreciate how important it is for change to be made. Now, how do you do that? Well, first of all, I think Dalit people need to act locally. All right, so you have a global concern, but you won't be able to change the situation for you unless you get the people around you, the people that you live with, to take the issue seriously. So I think it's very important for Dalit people to become very active in their local communities, to make connections with people who are not South Asian, and so that you can explain to them what your situation is. You can show them what your situation is. You should be involved in organizations, and you should get to know very important people. If you have a chance to meet the mayor, go meet the mayor and try to get some time with them, but also try to show them what the challenges are. So, and these things are very subtle. So remember, I try to show American students when they're in Nepal, well, what are these atrocities? These daily small atrocities that Dalit people have to endure. And I have to sit by them and I have to point it out. I have to say, see how that person sitting there is washing their own cup after drinking tea in this tea shop. They're the only people doing that. Other people are not doing that. And this is considered to be very demeaning behavior. So you have to, and people won't see that, right? You have to be able to show them the fine-grained behaviors that exist and how they exist on a daily basis. So I think acting locally and connecting to the community, I think you should try to build a stronger network than the people who are discriminating against you. So build a stronger network than the Brahmins are building. Get to know more people, get to know people who are in power, help them do things, make reciprocal relationships. None of this is easy and would have to be advanced through small steps, but I think that progress can be made. And then to Tej's question about the Caste Freedom Index. Where does that stand right now? Well, I've been working on the Caste Freedom Index probably since 2013, I would guess. I'm not the person who's building the index. My role in this has been to sell the index, to try to convince people who are not Nepali what the issues are, why this is so important. And then we have other people, a man named Meyer Glickman from the UK, who is putting the index together, the different sorts of measures that that we would use to try to rate this. So far, we have not been able to launch it. We've gotten close once or twice with a couple of governments. The government of Denmark was close to saying yes to a pilot study. USAID was sort of close to saying yes to a pilot study. And we've never even been able to find the money to conduct the pilot project, which would have been in Nepal. So it is on the agenda for the second global conference that was supposed to happen this July in Kathmandu. We're hoping it will happen maybe next July in Kathmandu, and try to sell it to that audience and try to get some people who might fund the pilot study. And then if we can show some success in the pilot study, then maybe get enough funding to apply it more generally throughout South Asia, and also to some other countries that have systems that are very caste-like. A couple of places in Africa, for example. And then the other question was about the politics of shame. So my take on the politics of shame is that it has to be very it has to be thought out very well. So you have to be able to either turn the heat up on shame or turn the heat down on shame at times. And I don't know exactly when you would do that, but certainly right now the politics of shame are being played out in the United States very vigorously for the African American community. So there are marches in many cities. I will attend a march later today in support of the African American community, with, of course, the murder of George Floyd being the index thing. But when we are marching, the African American leaders are making sure to speak to the white people in the audience, not shaming them. Right? They are thanking them, and they are saying that you are people that we should respect because you are here supporting our issue. On the other hand, a very famous quarterback wrote a statement that sounded like it was not in support of the African American issues. He's a white person, and many African American athletes responded to him, shaming him very strongly. And he has changed his statement now to be in support of African Americans, and has actually sent a tweet to the President of the United States saying that he supports the African American cause. So you have to be able to observe and to know when to turn the heat up and when to turn the heat down. But it should be there as a way of addressing it as a social justice issue. So when an atrocity happens in Melbourne, the Dalit people in Melbourne need to tell local people, white people mainly, what's going on, and try to get them to help shame the people who are, who are committing these atrocities. I think those were all the questions that were posed.
Okay, thank you, Professor Stephen. I'll get few more questions. One is from Shobha Pariyar. If you'd like to ask your question, Shobha Pariyarji, I'm giving you the floor. Shobha Pariyar, are you there? not there, then I'm moving to other person. So there are a few more hands raised from different participants. So now I'd like to ask Dil Vishwakarma.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, Folmer, for your remarkable presentation. As we all know that United Nations is the worldwide platform to raise different issues. For example, when women raise the issue of women especially, but, but United Nations does not know the word Dalit, and he he covers the Dalit issue as a marginalized community as a holistic approach. In South Asia, more than 200 to 300 million people are suffering from caste-based discrimination. If the United Nations establish different wings as a Dalit, UN Dalit system, the most of the issue will be internationalized. In this context, what will be the strategies to establish the Dalit wings in UN system as an international intellectuals? What you suggest? What would be the strategies to establish Dalit wings in UN system? Thank you.
Thank you, Dil Vishwakarma. I'm going to ask another person, another participant. How is Nepali? Would you like to ask a question?
Hello.
Yeah, we hear you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful. Okay, my question is, I would like to ask my question to Honorable Dr. Dorna. I've been watching nowadays talking that the word Dalit has to be replaced by some other words to reduce discrimination in Nepal. So, is it removing or replacing that Dalit word by any other form of word?
Mohamji, should I respond?
Yeah.
Okay. Ayush's question was, there was some distortion, and there was some noise, but Ayush, what he was asking was, there is quite a controversy around use of the word Dalit, but this is because of the misunderstanding among many people. The word Dalit was not actually coined by, given by any Brahmin or any so-called higher caste. Actually, this was the word used by Dr. Ambedkar for a very good purpose. It was not intended to be a demeaning word. Dalit doesn't mean that Dalit people are lower caste. It doesn't mean that they should be discriminated. That's the only the interpretation of Brahminist thinking, is the mindset. Basically, what I'm saying is Dalit is the word coined for us to fight back against the caste discrimination and untouchability, not the other way around. That's what I posted in Facebook a couple of days back. This word has been misused and abused, basically. It has been wrongly placed. Basically, Dalit word is required for our movement to go ahead because there has been a generational trauma for centuries. The Dalit people have been suffering. There is a healing process. When the state determines that there is no caste discrimination in the society, once the state declares that the caste untouchability is illegal, it is punishable crime, then the word of Dalit actually should be reactivated. It should be activated in the way that those people who were in the past considered untouchable or discriminated based on descent, they are the people who need to move forward with some compensatory measures that state and society should give to them, giving respect to them. Dalit people should be respected. That's the way it was designed to be, but in Nepal it is wrongly used. That's what we all should educate everyone, that Dalit doesn't mean it is a low caste. You know, Gandhiji coined the word Harijan. Harijan is such a sublime, good word, but that also was abused. People think that Harijan is a low caste. People think that Harijan is a untouchable, and it has to be untouchable for forever. That's not the case. That was intended to be to respect the Dalit people. That Harijan also is the same. It made the same fate. That's why we need to rethink. We have to actually re-explain and rethink the word Dalit. Using any other word, even if you call Dalit sun or moon, it is they are going to fare the same fate. It is the mindset, not the word. Dalit word doesn't have any connotation of discrimination. It is actually the mindset we have to change. That's all I can say now.
Thank you, Dr. Rosali. I'd like to inform all the
Could I
participants.
follow up on Jorna's comment?
Yeah, I just want to inform that in next series of webinar, we're going to have another round of discussion on Dalit word and direction of Dalit movement in Nepal. So that will be another great opportunity for us. And now I'd like to ask Stephen for answering the question. It was raised by Til Vishwakarma. Quickly.
I will answer that by saying that unfortunately that that is well beyond my experience. I have no experience with the United Nations. I don't really know what the specific strategies might be to get the United Nations to notice the Dalit problems and to comment on them, to advocate for changing them, to create structures and processes for change. But I do have a comment about it that also relates to the comment about the word Dalit. And I think that one of these is trying to build more unification under the Dalit banner. So one example that that sometimes troubles me a little bit is the debate about the term Dalit. And as Drona just pointed out, that whatever word we choose, there will be debate over that word. And the debate has certain values that should not be overlooked. But I would like us to consider how the debate amongst us plays into the hands of the people who have power over us. If we can get distracted by arguing about what we should call ourselves rather than action on the issues that we are dealing with, then the people in power have kind of won because they don't have to do anything. They can continue to try to divide the Dalit community, not only by the castes they belong to and by their social statuses, but also by their stance on certain issues, like what we call ourselves. I don't know how much you can hear because there's a lot of sound coming through somebody's unmuted microphone. So I also wanted to say, I know we're going to wind up soon. I also, for anybody, we had a lot of questions in chat. And I have put a chat message in there too. I've given everybody my email address if you want to follow up with questions that we were not able to get to. So back to you, Mom.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Stephen. If you don't mind, we can go beyond 10-15 minutes because there are so many questions, but of course I am not going to get more questions here, but I have to address or acknowledge some participants here: Dr. Puna Nepali and Dr. Vishnu Pariyar. Professor David Gullner is here. So I'd like to request Professor David Gullner, if you'd like to make some comments or remarks. Professor David Gullner.
Mute myself. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I apologize. I missed the beginning of this, so I won't say much. But let me congratulate you on having the meeting at all under the difficult present circumstances. I'm sure other people may have commented on this. It's incredible. It's very striking how, I mean, clearly the murderous policeman in Minneapolis and the villagers in Rukum were not in communication with each other, but the kind of the coincidence of these atrocities happening at the same time is very striking, and one can't help feeling, as people have remarked, that there is some connection between them, and that of course it's a connection that's only obvious to those of us who know Nepal, whereas the position, of course, the United States is being observed around the world, and protests are happening around the world. So I suppose one of the first things that Dalit activists need to do is to try and link up the two, link up their struggle. And of course, as we know, there are people who've tried to prevent that happening. And Steve mentioned the UN. There was the famous UN-sponsored conference in Durban in South Africa about racial discrimination, at which the Indian government went to huge, Indian delegation went to huge, made huge efforts in order to prevent caste being included under the category of racial discrimination. And a similar thing has happened in my own country, in that it is recognized by many people that caste discrimination surely, you know, it's a classic case of what should fall under our own racial discrimination, or what is now protected characteristics legislation, inequality. Caste should clearly be treated the same way that ethnic, religious, and racial discrimination is treated. And yet, a very powerful lobby of high caste Hindus in Britain have managed to prevent, although all the steps apparently have been taken. I mean, I'm not the expert on this. There is a lady called Annapurna Wohre who is the expert on these issues in the UK, and she would know what the actual current situation is. But my latest understanding, this may be slightly out of date, is that it is purely for technical reasons that the discrimination on the basis of caste is not included under our current race discrimination legislation, and anybody who's experienced it, and the people in the House of Lords had a special committee which collected lots of examples. There is anybody who is familiar with discrimination cases and discrimination law would say this obviously falls under the same thing, and yet it's managed to be blocked. So the legal struggle and the international struggle is clearly very important, and the links are recognized, especially in India. Obviously, I mean, I think the Dalit movement in Nepal needs to build up its links to the Dalit movement in India, obviously, because it's bigger, more powerful. I happened to be invited to a huge conference that was held in Bangalore about 3 years ago, where the then Congress government of Karnataka had a big Ambedkar memorial conference, which was a combination of academic conference and political rally, and that was absolutely fascinating. And they brought, well, Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King's son, was the chief guest flown in from the United States, and he gave a very powerful 40-minute speech, and he told a story about his father, who did visit India, I think twice, and on one of the occasions when his father visited India, his father went to an Indian school, and the headmaster of that school introduced Martin Luther King to the children of the school by saying, here is an untouchable from America. Here is an American untouchable who's going to speak to you. And Martin Luther King was very taken aback. He said, what? Am I an untouchable? But then he went away and thought about it. And he thought deeply about it. And he said, yes, yes. The discrimination which I face as a black man in America is exactly the same as the discrimination that untouchables face in India. And so this was a long, powerful speech by his son. So yes, I think I completely agree with what Steve says about the politics of shame. It is, I mean, it is, you know, many people have said this, that's not original at all, but it is horrifying that here we are again, you know, decades later, fighting the same fight. I mean, there are small signs of hope. I mean, and I take, you know, the young people in the United States who are standing up for this, you know, yes, the president of the United States is a racist, and quite openly so. So in a way, that has brought things to the surface in a way that perhaps might be good for the future. I mean, God help us if he manages to get re-elected later this year. But if he does not, then we might be able to turn a corner. And that's the point at which it's really important that the kind of Dalit issue gets hitched to these wider discrimination issues and treated together with it. And that might be the point at which to push the UN to include caste discrimination under race discrimination, in which case then there would be international, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it means that there would be legal instruments, international legal instruments that could be brought to bear on the countries of South Asia. I mean, the only other thought I have, which is you know, these atrocities which have so shocked everybody in Nepal. I mean, one of the sad things is, but at the same time, it can be a grounds for hope. And one of the things it's shown, I think, in the book by Mendelssohn and Viciani about the Dalit issues in India, is that the level of anti-Dalit atrocities rises at the point when Dalits start to make progress. And so it's unsadly to say, but it is, but in a horrible and horribly paradoxical kind of way, these atrocities are a sign that actually Dalits are making progress. And you know, clearly, you know, it's a call to action for everybody. So thank you. That's all I have to say for today.
Thank you, Professor David Gunnar, for your remarkable remarks. I know there are many hands are raised for questions, but we are limited by time. But I'd like to get 2 more comments or remarks in this discussion. So now I'd like to ask PMBK for quickly raising your question or comments.
Yeah. Good morning and namaste. Thank you, Momsur and this Folmer Strever. It was really a great pleasure for us to keep in this one platform to discuss in this issue. Professor Folmer, your presentation was very comprehensive, how to internationalize this issue, whether it should be internationalized or act in the local. This is very much interesting that, you know, this situation after the COVID, the situation, the issue of Rukum has bring all the Dalits, scholars, Dalit leaders, Dalit intellectuals in the research is one platform. That's why I just want to say this may be under this different circumstances, this is a great opportunity for Dalit communities and even the internationalized people to internalize this issue at the global level. So this is important because wherever they migrate, as you understand the caste discrimination is going in those countries, and how we can, you say, Dalit word is not understood by even the university, they just know for their dissertation, just like for their education and just the paper. So how can we educate, how can we inform international community about Dalits and what are the issues and concerns they have been facing, that type of atrocity and discrimination that is lacking. So we have to focus on, as a researcher, I would like to request Steve Folmer, Dr. Mom, Dr. Dharda Shali, other intellectual personality, David, Gunner say the issue of Black communities in America is the same as the issue of Nepal. So that is the same as, you see the George Floyd issue now more than the white peoples are, in this mission. Their respect and dignity. So that's why, how can we interlink this issue, Nepal to US or other country? So I have just suggestion. This is not question for Mr. Felmer, but I will write you the question. How can we educate? First, we have to focus, let's make one platform that is common for each and every people for the collective efforts. And we say we are always talking about the, national, that's a platform or international platform for this to raise the issues at an UN level. And Dr. Mom, thank you so much for raising the issues in the international level. That is the Hague. This is one of the major, major achievement for Dalit community to internationalize this issue. That's why, how can we be the threat to the government? You say the political same. How can we be the threat for the political leaders? We need one coalition or one platform so that we can be a threat and that issue can be addressed. So I would like to request all of you, please take this as an opportunity to be united first. First united, whoever we are, at least the COVID has changed the mindset. COVID is a very, it's a curative, but this caste discrimination of the Rukam, we have to take it very seriously, and we need to have a clear plan of action. How can we influence the, Department of State, United States, or embassies, UN missions, even the non-profit international organization? You see, the non-profit organization, INGOs have focused on Dalit and marginalized community. Is just for the name, just name for the diversity and inclusion. Are they really supporting Dalit community? While the people are dying day by day, it means this may be the defect of our movement. But why a defect? Because our people have been doing great job, but these people, again, now you see the day by day, the died cases is increasing. So it should be taken very seriously and from all level. And I would like to request the researcher, please, can you help to spread your word about Dalit in your university, to your student, so that at least, Peace Corps, 2 years they have been there. And if I'm working to Peace Corps here, they have been working in Nepal since 2 years. They don't know what really Dalit is.
Okay, thank you, Bim
So this type of suggestion, this is just a suggestion. So let's unite, and you have to, just my suggestion, how we can be united to work together nationally and internationally.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, Folmer?
I really want to respond to Bim's comments because I think they resonate very well with some of the points that I was trying to make. Unified messages are so much more powerful for other people to absorb than divided messages. So I think it's really important that we do exactly what you say, but the mechanism really isn't very well specified yet. So Bimji, I hope you don't mind that since this is your idea, I'd like us to think about forming a group of Dalit scholars who tackle this issue. How do we, as a committee, how do we create a unified message, which is the first part that you were really speaking about. Another part is how do we disseminate it, or who do we disseminate it to? And of course, you know, when you think about Dalit scholars in the United States, you're basically looking at the whole community right now. There's me and one or two other people. But the message, I think, can go to people like us. But I think the main message, the main recipient of our message in the United States should be the African American community, because if we want to make links with them, then it is through their very powerful voice that we might be able to get Dalit issues heard. I don't think we get our issues heard by going to the right wing of the Republican Party. I think it will fall on deaf ears, but they have to listen to African Americans, and they have to, and everybody else has to listen to African Americans when they speak powerfully in numbers. So I would suggest that if we can form a committee to think of what the message is and who to send it to, I would advocate that we start with minority groups that have some traction in the countries that they're in.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for that quick response as well. I'd like to just highlight some of the activities what we have been doing in these days. Since the start of this COVID situation, we have formed informal alliance of all the internationally active Dalit rights defenders or organizations who are active in US, UK, Europe, and Australia. Even we have included organization from Nepal. As a result of that informal alliance, we have been advocating the issues of Dalit in UN, United Nations, and International Court, Criminal Court as well. So we have well communicated the issues of Dalit human rights violation. Because of that, international agencies are providing some sort of attention on Dalit issues. So your idea of having collaboration or network of all the Dalit scholars is very important, and we have been working in this sector as well. And of course, we are happy to help. I mean, we are happy to include you in that network, and it could be common platform to raise the issues of the Dalit community. Thank you. I have one last comment from Dr. Vishnu Pariyar, and then I will sum up today's discussion. And then, yeah, Dr. Vishnu Pariyar.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Momji, for letting me speak for a bit, and also thank you to Steve for his wonderful contribution. We appreciate that, and I thoroughly enjoyed your paper. And also thank you to Dr. Rossley for his thoughtful and also uniting voice to bring us together. I just wanted to make a couple of comments and perhaps pose a simple question, if I may. And my first comment is on the use of the word Dalits. I think many of us tend to get confused about the essence of this word. And I think we also lose its powerfulness. If there is any word that has the capability to bring together, unite everybody for a common cause, I think it is the word Dalits. And this word should be preserved because it has the unique capacity to galvanize our shared experience of facing myriad of complex discriminations. let's take let's take a pride in this word. Let's not get confused.
Dr. Vishnu,
there are voices from ploy to disunite us, divide us. Again, divide and rule kind of things prevails. And another contribution that I want to make is religious conversion. I've been supervising a number of student theses on Christian conversion amongst Dalits. I think my own observation is that by converting to another religion, it adds another layer of complexity in our already so many complexities that we are having to experience. That's one thing. And my question is it's a general question. I think maybe Dr. Drona can, I would appreciate if Drona could make an effort to answer this. And my question is, whilst we call for a greater unity among ourselves, among different castes within the Dalit community, but what we have felt or we have not appreciated as much as what we should have been is the problem that exists within our community. And how do we begin to clear our own mess? Unless we work really, really hard in an innovative way to bring about the changes, bring about a range of caste-based discriminations among ourselves, I think the people who are oppressing us will have, obviously they'll raise questions. And I'm really sorry for taking a little bit long time, but I would really appreciate if.
Thank you, Vishnu Pariyaji. Now,
some colleagues could shed light on as to how.
Can I quickly respond to that?
Okay. Yep. Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Vishnu Pariyar, for this pertinent question. This is quite a recurring question, and there is no surprise in your question. There is a confusion about this issue as well. There is discrimination among Dalits only. This is a really Brahmanistic view of leveling this issue as any problem. But this is the issue of the whole society. Nepali society is so hierarchical. There is a discrimination in every level, every other two, even within the family, even within the relations, close relatives, there is a discrimination. It's a very hierarchical and very discrimination-based society that Nepal is. As a result, there exists definitely the discrimination among Dalits also. Dalit also is not just one caste. It is composed of several castes and ethnic groups of various origins. They may not even have come from the same origin. Some might be more Mongolist, some may be more South Indian, some may be Aryan, and all that mix I already mentioned earlier as well. We are a mixed class of group of people. What is the way out? What I'm seeing is this is a systemic problem, not an isolated problem or anything. It's part of the whole thing. Once that whole overarching caste discrimination issue is resolved, everything will be resolved. But within Dalits, we need to do some certain things. Even in my paper, the paper that Professor Steve Folmer referred earlier, I have posted here in the link. There is that paper. There also I have mentioned that sentence. That is that we are not united in a integrated way. Even in the time of this crisis, there is no one single organization that can voice at the national and local level in a united way. Actually, what we need is a society or or an strong organization. I'm calling this National Assembly of Dalits. We should have this, and we should have representation of all fringe groups of the Dalits, Sunar, Damai, or Kami, or Saki, or whatever we are. We should have all of them represented in that society, and we thrash out that problem within. We should not mix that as a part of the bigger problem, which is based on the Brahministic view. So this needs to be sorted out. There is no question about it. It is not acceptable at all to have any discrimination within and between Dalits. That's for sure. We should first be united, but we should have one single organization who should integrate it. That's what I'm looking at. There is a gap there. We need to have that. We all should join hands together to form that society. There is some, right now what we have is representation through political wings of Dalits, political parties wings, Dalit wings of the political parties. We have NGOs and some citizen groups. They are raising these voices. But there is no organizational framework that can voice our cause. That's the gap. That organization, if we have, we can resolve that within. That's what I want to say now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosali, for that quick remarks. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Man Bike, who is here throughout the session, and Dr. Purna Nepali, and all many participants here, Gaza Darsana, he is the leader, and many more. It is very difficult to announce all the participants' name here, but I'd like to quickly ask Dr. Purna Nepali for his quick remarks. This is the last remarks from today's discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mo, for organizing this wonderful event, because you have been engaged in this very pertinent issues during this pandemic situations. And this is a good illustration of the lot of solidarity that is happening from the very reputed academic institutions. And actually it is a need of the kind of complementing the this Dalit movement from the academia side. Very comprehensive presentations made by Steve Folmer and remarks from Dr. Rosali and Prof. Wellner. And I'm representing the Kathmandu University, teaching here some of the social science issues. And actually, when I was doing research and some sort of the contribution made by the Bhimrao Ambedkar and the Martin Luther King and the W. Boys, and actually I found a lot of kind of the communications that happen between these different kind of the global icons who has contributed for racial justice and caste justice. And actually from that essence, and actually I found that why not to work and recreate that sort of issues, and for kind of the international and regional solidarity. And I found a lot of similarities and as well as the dissimilarity, and actually taking some of the essence from that sort of the contributions made in the domain of the racial justice and social justice, and actually white supremacy and structural racism and institutional racism. And actually that gives a lot of sense and power to the white people, and that's why recently the US police did a lot of killings, and actually not only this time, and actually historical genocide also happened in the past. And similarly in case of the Nepal and caste supremacy and caste discrimination, and that's why the recently and actually the genocide happened in Rukum, and actually the member of the parliament, Janadar Sharma, and actually he dared to manipulate a lot of the essences, and actually contrary to the Dalit justice. And actually this kind of the caste supremacy actually gives a lot of powers and privilege to the historically privileged peoples, and to manipulate very inhuman behavior, and actually from this essence, and actually what I'm trying to say, and actually taking the all different kinds of similarity, and actually we should be very much united through the rainbow approach. And actually I'm trying to put forward to some of the things, and actually we should be able to adopt the rainbow approach, and because we have a lot of similarity happening against the race and against the caste issue. And actually that gives a lot of power for us to be united. And actually at the same time, we have a lot of dissimilarity, and actually different scholars have also put, and actually we should be able to provide a lot of space. And actually within the Dalit community, we are heterogeneous, and actually different scholars have also put, and actually that sort of the dissimilarity also gives the power, and because we have a lot of diversity, and actually we should be able to put this space for the diversity, and actually taking that sort of the similarity and dissimilarity, and actually we should be united through the rainbow approach. And actually the rainbow approach gives a very good space to each and every section of the people, and in terms of the caste hierarchy and racial, gender and class and all these issues. And actually also I'm trying to say and to have a solidarity at the international level, and also solidarity at the regional and national or local level. And actually what are the constraining factors? And actually some of the scholars, Professor David and Dr. Dorna and Steve have also mentioned that, and actually directly we are we do not have a lot of space to put the caste-based discrimination in the international arena. And actually International Convention for Racial Discrimination doesn't allow a lot of space to put for the caste justice. And actually we have a lot of constraining factors. At the same time, we have a lot of catalytic factors. And similarly, in case of the regional context, and actually in case of, if you want to contribute from the Nepal side, and there are not much academic contributions made from the Nepalese side, and actually all of the scholars and should be able to well engage to amplify or to explore a lot of issues. And actually the Bhimrao Ambedkar, he did a lot of things, and actually he's becoming the regional icon, and actually he contributed a lot, and he's one of the pioneer to explore a lot of issues. And actually we should be able to learn, and actually the regional solidarity also should be in place. And also in case of the Nepalese context, and actually a lot of things that we have to do, and taking a lot of contribution made by the Ambedkars, and also from the kind of WP Boys and Martin Luther King. And we should be actually should have a lot of solidarity. Actually, the global icons, and actually they have very strong trajectory of the struggle. And actually, if you look at the trajectory of this struggle, and actually W.B. Boys and Martin Luther King, and actually they have contributed a lot. And actually taking all those sense, and actually we should have a lot of solidarity. And I'd like to request, and very less work has been done in case of the Nepal, and I would like to request the David, Professor David, and Professor Steve, a number of the scholars, and we are here, Dr. Vishnu and Dr. Momen. Actually, we should have a lot of solidarity, and we should have some academic and kind of the policy platform, and also so that a lot of Nepalese emerging scholars should also be encouraged and motivated to be engaged, very in a scholarly point of view, so that our policy and mainstream political actors will also be able to listen very properly. And actually, at the end, also I would like to say, and it's all of us are representing the technical camp, or all of us are the technical actors, and actually only the contribution made by the technical camp or technical people, and it would not be the sufficient. And also we should be able to engage and political mobilizations of the different political actors and political parties. And actually Bhimrao Ambedkar's, Martin Luther King and W.P. Boys has well demonstrated in case of the US, in case of the India. And also we should be able to learn from them, and how can we engage the political actors and the different political alliances. And actually they are becoming very much active in this case, and actually they will contribute much better than us. And actually this is the right time, and how can we engage that political actors and political parties, and they have a lot of voice, and they have a greater voice than us. And actually this is a very tactical approach, and we should be able to engage them. And politically mobilization is a must. Okay, thank you very much. It is a from my side. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask Stephen, can I take one or two questions? You're on mute.
Yes, sure.
Sure. Okay. So then,
Briefly.
I'd like to
My
ask
computer is close to being out of battery.
Oh, okay. So would you mind to take one or two questions?
Sure.
Okay. Then I'd like to ask Rosni Gohatras to raise your question.
So,
Rosni?
hello everyone, good evening. So my question is for everyone. So what do you think about Dalits in different government service? Why we cannot fight openly? Because as in youth, I have heard from the so-called upper caste, they think until and unless government has not revoked our uh, Dalit seat, they will appreciate the caste-based discrimination. So, what you all think about this?
Okay, thank you, Rosni. So we'd like to respond this question.
Can I respond a little bit on that?
Yes, sure.
This is also a recurring question, basically. I'm not surprised with this question. This is, again, a Brahmanistic view of thinking. But what you must realize, as I said earlier, our struggle starts after the state declares Nepal is discrimination-free, untouchably free country. Our struggle starts from there. From there, you have to look at the society as a whole, and you will find that in every measurable indicators, health or wellness or wealth, any criteria, any indicators you will see that Dalit people, all those who are were under the caste, what we call Dalits, under that framework, you will find all people at the lowest level. In the quintiles, if you measure in quintiles, they will be the lowest quintile level. And society and the country and the state cannot just stay back doing nothing about this lowest quintile of people who are in income, education, health, anything, you name it, all kinds of diseases, all the poverty, I mean, everything of disadvantages, disadvantageousness you will find in Dalits. To correct that, you will need to give extra impetus. You have to have a targeted universalism approach of addressing their problems so that they can be coming to the mainstream. There is, if you don't do that, then for another 1,000 years, Dalits will be remaining Dalits. That's why to correct the past wrong, we have to give some quota and reservation, a special framework to help them come up so that they can compete. There are some people who can compete. For your information, you know, whatever I have achieved, I have not even gotten single penny from government of Nepal, even from my high school or anywhere other than as a Dalit. If I got the scholarship, it was a full competition and it was at the highest level. I mean, the competition had excelled every other Nepalese in many competitions. That's what happened. That's what where I am now. That was the reason. So their competition should go on, but at the same time, there is disparities, there is inequalities. To correct that wrong, we need some special quotas. And Constitution of Nepal makes clearly, explicitly a provision about that. I hope this is clear.
Yeah, it's clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
May I raise a question?
I'd like to ask Dr. Man Biswakarma. Dr. Man, do you have any comments or remarks? Maybe he's not listening. So there is one question from Dol Suna.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and Steve, for your presentation. I have a question and also a remark, like, can we make Dalit as a class? Can we internationalize Dalit as a class? As Dr. Drona before mentioned, Dalit is not about a single caste. It's it's a class. It's combination of different castes. And as I refer to Gebner, like in South Asian context, Dalit also remains as a class, because the same condition is remained in India also. So that is one. Can we make it? Can we take it as a class? And another, regarding your internationalization point of view, like whatever we have been seeing recently in the name of racism or in the name of casteism, in the recent period globally, there are so many protests. Even in Australia, it started now. Black Lives Matter, like that kind of protest. Even we see in Canada. Are our international forums or the whatever we have made progress, are they failure situation, or the movement, the process they have been addressing is failed now, or do we need to revise them to address these kinds of, or whether it is a racial or casteism discriminations? Do we need to think of that, and actually you like scholars could make it more internationalized, and the role of UN, how it is effective in that aspects, and in particularly case of Nepal, do the donors, international donors, like should they be revised their policies to support caste-based, to end caste-based discrimination in Nepal? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Could you please conclude your question? Okay, so I'd like to ask Professor Stephen if you have any quick response on it.
Certainly. I mean, there were a lot of questions, and I'll try to keep my response brief. But
yeah.
I'd like to address the question of whether or not Dalit people form a caste or class, or is it an ethnic group or race. So to me, it's dangerous for us to use the term class for Dalit people, because it focuses solely on economic status. At least in many academic circles, that's what class means. It means how much money do you have, and it is supported by things like education. But a person's class in Nepal does not determine what caste they are in. It doesn't even influence what caste they are in. But the caste that you are in does influence what class is available to you. Some Dalits have overcome those barriers, but most Dalits have not really overcome those barriers. And in a sense, what I'm also saying is that at a fine-grained level, it's extremely important because it tells you who we focus on. So if we focus on class and we lump all Dalit people into a class, then we can say, well, if we are addressing an issue of poverty, then we are automatically addressing the issue of caste also, the issues that pertain to Dalits. But we know very often that when class is focused on, Dalit people are still ignored. And so you can address a class issue by still ignoring Dalit people. And so I think the best way to think of Dalit is that it's a collection of castes. It's a category that is still caste-based. And within it, there are things that unify people, the condition of oppression, and things that also divide people, that is the hierarchical nature of the caste system within the Dalit group. But I also think that it fails to, or the idea of Dalit being equivalent to something else like race or ethnic group fails to meet the criteria by which people at the local level define those things. So a Dalit person in the United States will not be able to claim some affinity with, some affinity of identification with Native Americans or with African Americans, but they can claim an affinity of being oppressed with Native Americans or African Americans. So to me, Dalit is this large encompassing category that in South Asia refers to this collection of castes, but globally could be used to refer to a collection of all people who are oppressed by reasons of an essentialized identity. So African Americans are also Dalit people in a sense. But I would not really promote the idea that we call Dalits a class, a category maybe, but I wouldn't. I think that we dilute the importance of the meaning of Dalit by trying to refer it to a different kind of social structure category.
Okay, thank you, Professor Stephen. I know there are many questions and many comments for this specific webinar, but as I said before that we are going to have a specific discussion on Dalit world and direction of Dalit movement as such. So at the end, sorry for other hands who are raising their hands here to ask the question, because I'm not able to take any more questions in this specific webinar. Now I'm going to wind up or close this session. I'm very thankful or grateful to Professor Stephen, because who has comprehensively presented on the internationalization of Dalit issues and its challenges and opportunities as well. So it has of course raised so many questions for Dalit activists, including Dalit scholars in this sector, because there are some comments and remarks that we need to be united to raise the Dalit in international forum, as well as in academia as well. So it is very, very good discussion today we had, and I hope in the future as well we'll have such gratitude of, such depth of discussion in specific issues. I'm really thankful to Dr. Duana Rosali, Dr. Vishnu Parer, and all the participants, even Dr. Man Vishwakarma, because I invited him for remarks, but he was not able to give any remarks because he was busy with the other phone. And I'm really, really thankful to all the participants who provided their time. And I hope in next series of discussion you will be able to present yourself and raise the question as well. Thank you so much for today, and I'm going to end this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you all of you. Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.